Hey pals, it's story time. So last year, I went through my stash. Fabric, yarn, patterns, random crafting supplies, and when I finished, I was left with a good chunk of my stash that I realized I didn't want. Either because I couldn't see a project I'd want to do with it, or it had a feel I just didn't like anymore in the end. Also, I had like a million dress patterns. Nobody needs that many dress patterns. Anyway, I was looking at this pile of stuff, and I didn't know what I'd do with it. Then I remembered in middle school we had a class called Practical Arts. We spent a third of each year doing a block of home ec, and part of that was sewing. The other two things in PA were woodworking and tech, and they were fun. It was good times. But for the sewing section of home ec, there was a bin of random fabric that we could use for practice or whatever project we were working on if we could go out and buy any of our own.
Light bulb.
Why not donate my unwanted portions of stash to a school? I mean, a lot was given to me because there was a possibility of a good home for it, and in the end, I may not have been the home for all of it, but a school would be. Well, except patterns. I bought all of my patterns and I sunk like $700, $900, somewhere in that range, into my collection. I wanted some of that back. So, messaged my cousin. Her kid's school didn't have a sewing class. It had cooking and nutrition, but not anything to do with sewing. How did they have one life skill center class, but not the other? I also know people that have kids in high school, and one of the kids is on my socials. So I messaged her asking her if she knew whether or not they took any donations for the home ec sewing classes there. Completely different one, in a completely different division than my cousin's kid's school. Her school didn't have one either. I ended up looking at 5 other schools in the city before I found one that had a sewing class or unit. A friend of mine helped me get the applicable items to the school, and that was that. But how do only 1 out of 7 schools I looked at have a class dedicated to sewing, even if it was just in part with a unit or 2, right? Most of these schools were more middle-class neighborhoods. And yes, if your school is in a less affluent area, then funding is really tight, and so that can make it harder to get programs in there. But, most of these schools were not in hard-up areas. It didn't make sense. I know, I'm gonna sound like an old lady, but in my high school, there were 2, possibly 3 home ec classes, and each lasted for a term. There was the nutrition class that covered cooking, possibly one for family-related household things. It was the one that has those robo-practice babies everybody takes turns with. And I can't remember if that was included with their nutrition class, or it was its own separate course. And then, of course, there was clothing, housing, and design. And that covered sewing and home design. And okay, yeah, we may have spent a few classes doing nothing but watching the original run of Queer Eye. This was long before the Netflix reboot, back when Netflix just rented and sold DVDs by post. But we did design wardrobes and rooms for people in that class. And we made things, we did stuff like that. It was a practical class. And yeah, I was gutted in grade 12 when I had to drop it, because I had all my provincial exams in the same term, and I just didn't have time to do the full workload. It really sucked. This was in the early noughts, so it was a while ago, and I can't remember everything from it. But the thing that stuck with me, aside from some sketches that I still have, was the basics. And with those basics, I've been able to do things like mend clothes, fix hems, figure out how to alter pre-made garments, and even create some clothes from scratch. And true, okay, I use patterns or pre-made clothes in lieu of patterns to make those clothes from scratch, because drafting is something I still need to practice a bit more before I'm comfortable with it. Also, zippers. Never been great with installing zips. And don't get me started on invisible zippers, okay? Those things are evil incarnate, and I hate them. But I digress. Now, I'm not saying everybody needs to know how to sew a dress or a pair of trousers. But knowing how to mend a hole in a shirt, fix a split seam, sew on a button, adjust a hem, these are all useful skills to have. Especially nowadays, where we have frickin' Shein or Shine or however the hell you say it, and Zara, and all these fast fashion brands, where clothes just seem to be intentionally made to not last more than maybe a year, right? Okay? Because most people are getting rid of these clothes within a couple of years of purchase, and this is happening more and more frequently than in the past, because you can replace them for relatively cheap. But a lot of the time, they're totally fixable. I mean, I have staple shirts in my wardrobe that I have had for over a decade, including this shirt that I'm wearing right now, right? Okay, I've had it for over a decade. And these are from fast fashion stores. Like, ugh. Thing is, I took the time to fix them or alter them if the fix was in a weird spot. And I also took the time to launder with care so I won't wear them out as fast, because laundering, ladies and gents, does wear out your clothes. You wear them, you're wearing out. You wash it, you're wearing it out. It's just the way it is. So you have to take care of it. You have to launder it properly. And knowing how to do this has saved me so much money over the years, because I don't have to go and buy new clothes every year. Like, it saves me money. And it's given me also a bit of a boost, because I know that there are things I can fix in this world, and it kind of helps my brain on some level, on, some days. But I know that I can take something and make it like new in some cases, and in the cases I can't, I can tweak it, make it my own. And I've done that a few times. But schools are taking that option away from subsequent generations. They are, or at least they seem to be anyways, pushing things that aren't going to help you out in your daily life more and more in order to shove you towards the university and college machine. There's nothing wrong with going to uni or college. I went to uni for a few years, But they're doing so at the cost of the practical options that are going to be useful to everybody in daily life. And if they're not taking them away, they're making them less desirable. And this was the thing even when I was in school. Like, excuse me, classes like clothing, housing, and design aren't considered a valid credit course at all post-secondary institutions. So if you want to get into one, and you want to keep your options open, then these classes aren't as prudent. And if you're like me with everything major happening all at once, you gotta cut something. And it's those classes that are gonna get the tutor treatment. And it's not just here. I've asked multiple people from all over, mostly North America, but some from other countries as well, about their available options when they were in school and what their kids have. There were some that didn't have it at all, then or now. Others just had it when they were in school, but their kids don't now. Or it was mandatory for them, but either only an option or non-existent for their kids now. There were like one or two people who didn't have it at all, but their kids did, but that's super rare. Like, the vast majority of people that I talk to, the latter generations only have these courses as electives at best, or not offered at all at worst. And it's just so frustrating that these once common skills from just a generation or two before mine are dying out in a time where we could really use them. These classes need to stay. The skills learned in them contribute to a sustainable society, and we should be encouraging that, not letting them go the way of the dodo. And yeah, I'm sure some of you watching will be like, oh, just take a class online. Well, that usually costs money, and the people that can benefit from this the most, they don't typically have extra money. They're paying for food and rent and bills. Like, it's just not necessarily a viable option for everybody. It being offered in a public or state school, depending on where you are in the world and what you call it, won't cost any extra, 'cause it's included. And not everybody has access to good internet connections. I know some people that had dial-up until a few years ago because the infrastructure just didn't exist in their rural community. And yeah, libraries, they're a great place to access the internet, but you can't necessarily, take your project down to the computers at the library to work on your online class. It's just not always feasible. And at home, not everybody has somebody at home that can show them. Like, whether that's down to time constraints or skill, like, there are barriers later. So having it in school is the best option, just for the basics. If you want to expand on that when you're older, that's different. But just the bare bones basics. Push the schools to have these skills in their classes. Even if it's just a generic home ec class. Like, I'm not saying it has to be sewing centric where all you learn are sewing techniques and that type of thing. It's just, these are important skills. You include it with cooking and family or household planning, right? Like, they're all important life skills that everybody needs, regardless of who you are. Like, it's important to life. Okay? It's important. Thank you for listening to my thoughts. And I guess I should be including that little bit where I tell you to like, share, subscribe, check out my other videos, all those fun things. And also become a member for exclusive content. The link will be below in the description. So until next time, pals, blessed be.